People think they're safe as long as the door is locked. But locks don't matter if something already has access. Tonight, you're going to hear 3 stories where someone didn't break in. They didn't need to, because they were already inside or found another way in. It didn't knock, it just tried the handle. My name is Daniel. I'm 27. This happened when I was living alone outside Columbus, in a neighborhood where the houses spread out just enough that you stop hearing people at night. I worked remote IT support. Most of my day was spent inside. Log in around 8, sit in the spare room with my laptop, take breaks in the kitchen, shut everything down by early evening. After that, it was just dinner, some TV, and sleep. The house itself was small. 1 floor, 2 bedrooms. A narrow hallway connected everything. The front door opened straight into the living room. From the couch, you could see almost the entire place. The porch light outside worked, but it didn't reach far. Past the concrete step, everything dropped into shadow. That was normal for the area. Most of the streetlights were spaced out. At night, the neighborhood got quiet, in a way that felt complete. Not peaceful exactly, just empty. That was part of the reason I picked it. The first time something happened, I didn't treat it like anything serious. It was late, around 11:30. I was in the kitchen rinsing a glass before heading to bed. The sink was running. I almost didn't hear it. A small shift of metal from the front of the house. I turned the water off and stood there, listening. Nothing. Then it came again. A slow, controlled movement. The front door handle turning down slightly, then easing back up. Not a knock, not someone trying to force it, just testing it. I waited for a voice or footsteps, something that would make it make sense. Nothing came. I walked into the living room and looked at the door, still closed, locked, no movement outside the glass panel. I stepped closer and listened again. Nothing. I told myself it was probably the house settling. The temperature had dropped that night. Older places make sounds when that happens. Pipes, wood, even the frame around the door. That explanation held just long enough for me to go to bed. By morning, it felt even smaller. I forgot about it completely. The next few days were normal. Work, the same routine, nothing unusual. If anything, the quiet felt reassuring again. Then Friday night, it happened a second time. I'd fallen asleep on the couch and woke up sometime after 1 in the morning. The TV was still on, low volume, casting a dull blue light across the room. When I stood up to turn it off, I heard it, clear this time, the handle, turning slowly. I froze. It held at the bottom for a second, then eased back into place. I stayed where I was, watching the door. It happened again, longer, more pressure. I heard the latch press lightly against the frame, like someone leaning into it, just enough to feel resistance. My first thought was that someone had the wrong house. Maybe they were drunk, or confused, or just trying doors. I moved to the window beside the door and pulled the curtain back just enough to see the porch. No one was there. The step was empty. The yard beyond it was just darkness. I let the curtain fall and stood there listening. Nothing else happened. No footsteps leaving, no voice, no car, just silence. I walked up to the door and checked the lock, still fully turned. I stood there longer than I needed to, hand on the deadbolt, noticing something I hadn't before. There was a slight looseness in it, not enough to call it broken, just not solid. I went to bed anyway. The next day I stopped at a hardware store and bought a door brace, one of those metal bars that wedges under the handle from the inside. It felt like overkill when I was buying it, but it was cheap. I told myself it was just temporary. That night, I set it in place before going to bed. Nothing happened. Sunday night, same thing. Quiet. By Monday, I'd started to feel stupid for reacting to it at all. Then it came back. I was asleep in my bedroom. Door open, hallway light on. I woke up to the sound immediately this time. No confusion. The handle, turning slowly. I sat up and listened. It stopped, then started again. Longer this time, more deliberate. I got out of bed and stepped into the hallway. The floor was cold under my feet. The light from the hallway stretched into the living room. Just enough to outline the front door. The handle moved again. And this time, it didn't stop right away. It stayed down, like whoever was outside was holding it there, trying to figure something out. Then I heard it. A faint scrape at the base of the door. Metal against wood, the brace. They were pushing against it. I didn't move. The pressure stopped. For a few seconds, everything was completely still. Then I heard breathing. Close to the door, slow, controlled, not loud. Just close enough that it carried through the frame when everything else was silent. I took one step forward. The breathing stopped. Whoever was outside had heard me. There were maybe 10 feet between me and the door. I could see the bottom edge clearly now. The thin line of darkness beneath it. A shadow shifted across that line, not passing by. Standing there. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to confirm exactly where I was. The handle turned again, harder this time. The door gave a short, heavy shake against the frame. The brace held. I stepped back without meaning to. The pressure stopped again. Then there were 2 soft taps on the door. Not a knock, just 2 light, spaced taps, like a signal. I grabbed my phone and called 911. The dispatcher kept her voice calm, asking questions one at a time. Was someone still outside? Was the door secure? Could I see them? I answered quietly, watching the door the entire time. Nothing else happened while I was on the phone. No movement, no sound of leaving, just silence. When the deputies arrived, they checked the front, the sides of the house, the yard beyond it. No one was there, no footprints they could see, no signs of forced entry. One of them tested the handle from outside while the other stood inside with me. The brace shifted slightly under pressure. "You did the right thing putting this in," he said. Then he checked the deadbolt. "It's got a little play in it." That was it. No urgency. No follow-up beyond a basic report. They suggested replacing the lock and maybe installing a camera. After they left, I didn't sleep. I stayed on the couch with the lights on, staring at the door until morning. The next day, I called my landlord. It took 2 days for someone to come out. The maintenance guy replaced the deadbolt and adjusted the frame. While he was working, he pointed something out. The old lock hadn't been aligned properly, not enough to fail completely, but enough that if someone leaned on the door while turning the handle, the latch didn't sit as firmly as it should. I asked him if that meant someone could have gotten in. He shrugged. "Not easily," he said, "but easier than it should be." I moved out a few weeks later. Nothing else happened. That's the part that stays with me. No repeat attempts, no escalation, no clear explanation, just silence. When I went back to collect the last of my things, then I noticed the front door before I even unlocked it. It was closed, but slightly off in the frame. Not open, just not sitting right, like it had been pushed shut without fully catching. Inside, everything looked the same. Nothing missing, nothing obviously moved. Except the brace. I'd left it standing against the wall near the front closet. Now it was on the floor, a few feet away. My brother said I probably knocked it over the last time I left. That made sense. Everything about it made sense. The loose lock, the misalignment, someone trying a door in a quiet neighborhood. All of it had explanations, but the part I can't shake is this. They didn't start by knocking. They didn't try to get my attention. They tested the handle slowly, more than once, on different nights, like they were learning how much resistance there was. And the last time, when the brace stopped the door from giving, they tapped it twice. Not out of frustration, not out of anger. Just enough to let me know. They understood exactly why it hadn't opened. Which means they weren't guessing, they were testing it until it worked. It wasn't supposed to be possible to be alone in a place that size. Marcus, 22. And this happened when I was working night shift at a grocery store just outside Indianapolis. I wasn't security, I stocked shelves. The shift started at 10. By midnight, the store was usually empty. After 2, it felt like the place shut itself down. Lights still on, doors still open, but no movement, unless it was one of us. There were always at least 3 people scheduled, one in the back, one on the floor, and a manager in the office. And there were cameras everywhere, every aisle, every register, every entrance. You couldn't move through that store without being picked up on at least one feed. That's why the first thing didn't bother me. I was working canned goods, lining up soup and vegetables, straightening rows, normal stuff. I stepped back to check the shelf, turned to grab another box from the pallet, then turned back. 3 cans were out of line, not fallen, not missing, just pushed forward slightly. I fixed them and kept going. A minute later, I heard something in the next aisle, a soft shift, like cardboard sliding against cardboard. I figured it was one of the other guys working nearby. I didn't check. Nothing else happened that night. The next shift, it happened again. Different aisle, same time. I was stocking cereal, light boxes, easy to move. I set a row in place, turned for more. And when I looked back, one of the boxes was gone. I checked the floor. Nothing. I looked down the aisle. Empty. No cart, no movement, no sound. I stepped into the next aisle and looked both ways. Still nothing. That's when it felt wrong. Not enough to stop working, but enough that I noticed it. A few minutes later, I found the missing box. Same aisle, 3 sections down, placed cleanly on a different shelf, like it had always belonged there. I didn't mention it. It didn't sound like anything worth saying out loud. The next couple nights were normal again. Then it happened a 3rd time. I was in the frozen section. That part of the store is louder, constant hum from the freezers. Fans turning on and off. It makes everything feel slightly isolated. I was loading meals into one of the glass door cases when I heard something behind me. A cart moving. Slow. I turned immediately. Nothing there, no cart in the aisle, no one walking past. Just the pallet I'd been working from. I walked to the end of the aisle and looked toward the main floor. Empty. No customers, no co-workers. I stood there for a few seconds, waiting. Nothing. That's when I decided to check the cameras, not because I thought something serious was happening. Just to prove to myself I was overthinking it. The monitor was in the back office. I walked in. The manager wasn't there. The screens were already on. I found the frozen aisle feed and watched it. It showed exactly what I expected. Me, standing there, turning around, looking behind me, no one else. I watched it again. Same thing. I switched to the next aisle. Empty. Then the next. Empty. Every camera showed the same thing. Just me. I stood there longer than I needed to, trying to match what I heard with what I saw. There was no way to line them up. I went back to work. But after that, I started noticing a pattern. It didn't happen randomly. It happened when I moved. Every time I entered a new aisle and started working, I'd hear something behind me after a few seconds, not immediately. Just enough time for me to settle. Then, a box shifting, a cartwheel turning slightly, something small. Every time I turned around, nothing was there. I tested it. I moved faster between aisles. The sound followed. I stayed in one place longer. It didn't happen. Only when I moved. That's when it stopped feeling like coincidence. I went back to the office. This time the manager was there. I told him something was off in the aisles. Not dramatic, just that I kept hearing things move where nothing showed up on camera. He didn't react much, just pulled up the feeds. We watched the aisle I'd just come from. Nothing. Then another. Nothing. He leaned back and said, "Probably sound carrying. Happens at night." That should have been enough. But while we were standing there, I heard it again. A faint shift, not from the monitors, from the store. I looked at him. He didn't react. Either he didn't hear it, or he ignored it. I went back out. The store felt different now. Not empty, just not consistent. I returned to the aisle I'd been working. Everything looked normal, except one thing. A box I'd placed was turned slightly sideways, not fallen, just wrong. I didn't fix it. I stepped back and looked down the aisle. Still empty. That's when I stopped working. I went back to the office and told him I wanted to check everything again. He didn't argue this time. We went through each camera one by one. Produce, empty. Frozen, empty. Center aisles, empty. Front registers, empty. We checked them again. Same result. No one in the store, no movement, nothing out of place. When we finished, he didn't say anything right away. He just kept looking at the screens. Then he reached for the mouse, rewound one of the feeds. The aisle I'd just been in. He watched it carefully this time, not just letting it play, stopping, rewinding, playing again. I stood next to him, watching the same footage. I saw myself walk out of the aisle, turn the corner, disappear from view. Then the frame sat empty, just the shelves, nothing moving. He rewound it again, a few seconds earlier, watched it again. This time, he paused it, didn't say anything, just leaned slightly closer to the screen. I looked at where he was pointing. At first, I didn't see anything. Then I noticed it, not movement. Position, something in the aisle that hadn't been there when I walked through. Not clear enough to define. Not a person you could point to, just a shape. Standing between two shelves, farther down. In a spot I hadn't looked, and it was there after I had already left the aisle. I looked at him. He didn't explain it, didn't zoom in, didn't rewind again. He just let the frame sit there for a second longer. Then he closed the feed, stood up, and locked the office door from the inside. That was the first thing he did that didn't feel routine. He picked up the radio and called for the other stalker. No answer. Tried again. Nothing. He looked at the screens once more, then turned to me. He told me to leave through the back and not walk past the aisles again. I didn't ask questions, I didn't argue. I walked straight to the back hallway. Didn't look into any aisles, didn't stop, just kept moving until I reached the exit. I stepped outside and waited. A few minutes later, he came out, alone. I asked him what he saw. He shook his head. "Probably nothing," he said. Then locked the front doors for the night. I worked 2 more shifts after that. Nothing happened. No sounds, no movement, everything normal. Then I stopped taking night shifts, transferred to afternoons, eventually quit. I never got an explanation, no report, no follow-up, nothing. But the part that stayed with me wasn't the sounds, or the shelves, or even the cameras. It was that one frame, the one he paused, because I had already walked out of that aisle. And whatever was standing there wasn't there when I went in. The first screw didn't fall from a table. It fell from the ceiling. My name is Silas. I'm 28, and at the time I was living in what I thought was the safest place I'd ever rented. A smart complex in a gated community in North Dallas. Everything about it was controlled. Key fob access at every entrance. Elevators that wouldn't move without authorization. Cameras in every hallway. Reinforced doors. It felt like the kind of place where nothing could reach you unless you let it in. That's what I believed. For the first couple months, the only thing that bothered me was the dust. Every morning, I'd wake up with fine black specks on my pillow. Not lint, not dirt, something rougher. It stuck to my skin, got into my hair, even my nose. I called management. They said it was probably the HVAC filters, promised to send someone. No one ever came. Then the sound started. It wasn't random. Every night, about 10 minutes after the air conditioning shut off, I'd hear it. A slow, heavy vibration from above. Not a hum. More like movement. Thump, pause, scrape. I told myself it was ductwork. Big buildings shift air in strange ways. Pressure builds, metal flexes. That explanation held for a while. Until I found the zip tie. It was sitting on my kitchen counter when I got home one evening. Black, heavy duty, cut clean at one end. I didn't own zip ties. I hadn't had anything delivered. The only explanation was maintenance. Someone must have come in while I was out. That should have reassured me. Instead, it made something worse settle in. Because I hadn't been told, and nothing else in the apartment had been touched. The dust on my pillow kept getting worse. A few days later, I noticed the vent. The return vent in the hallway, large, rectangular, was slightly open. Not wide, just enough that it didn't sit flush against the wall. I pushed it back into place. The plastic tabs clicked, but they felt weak. That night, around 2 in the morning, I woke up to a smell. It wasn't rot. It wasn't garbage. It was something closer. Unwashed skin, mixed with something sharp, almost mint-like. It was faint, but it wasn't drifting. It was coming through the vents. I sat up and looked toward the hallway. The vent was open again. That's when I stopped trying to ignore it. The next morning, I pulled up the building plans from my lease documents. I work in drafting, not HVAC specifically, but enough to understand layouts. What I saw didn't make sense at first. Then it did. The building wasn't separated the way I thought it was. Behind the walls, above the ceilings. It was all connected, not individual ducts, not sealed systems. One continuous open space running through every unit. A hollow structure big enough to move through. The cameras watched the hallways. The locks controlled the doors. But nothing was watching the space inside the building itself. That night I stayed awake, lights off, sitting on the couch facing the hallway. I left the bedroom door open so I could see the vent above the bed. At 1:15, the AC shut off. The apartment went completely quiet. 5 minutes later, the sound started. Not a vibration, a scrape, slow, heavy, moving, from the kitchen toward the bedroom. I watched the ceiling. One of the panels shifted just slightly. A thin beam of light slipped through the gap and swept across the wall, then disappeared. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I stayed low behind the couch, trying to make myself smaller than I was. Then I heard it. A muffled sneeze, close. Not from the ceiling anymore, from inside the wall behind me. That's when everything clicked. The dust, the sound, the smell. Someone had been moving through that space, not passing through, living in it, directly above me. I turned my head slowly toward the bedroom. The vent above the bed was moving, not falling, not breaking, unscrewing. One corner dipped slightly, then steadied, then dipped again. A soft metallic tapping followed, slow, controlled, like someone taking their time. I stayed frozen, watching. The last screw came loose, the grate tilted downward just enough to create a gap. And then I saw it. Fingers pale, damp, pressing against the edge of the drywall. For a second, they didn't move, like whoever was up there was listening, waiting. I didn't wait. I grabbed my keys off the table and ran. I didn't look back, didn't turn on the lights, didn't stop until I was outside across the parking lot inside my car with the doors locked. I drove without thinking. Didn't even know where I was going until I pulled into a 24-hour diner a few miles away. That's where I called the police. That's where they came with building management. By the time we got back, the apartment was empty. But they didn't leave empty-handed. In a vacant unit 2 floors below mine, they found the entry point. Boards kicked out behind a utility wall. An opening just big enough to climb into. From there, it connected to everything. They followed it up, not fully, just enough. Above my bathroom, they found a piece of plywood laid across the beams, a blanket, food wrappers, and a small drilled hole hidden behind the trim of my light fixture, just big enough to look through. They said it had probably been used for weeks, maybe longer. They didn't find him, and they didn't look long enough to make me believe they expected to. Management told me they'd seal everything, reinforce the openings, upgrade the system. They offered free rent. I moved out the next day. I live in an older place now. No shared air, no hidden spaces, just window units. Loud, inefficient, but simple. Because every time the air kicks on, I know exactly where it's coming from. And more importantly, I know it isn't passing through anywhere else first. Some of these stories continue because people keep encountering the same systems. If you want to hear the next ones, staying subscribed is how they reach you.